Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Councilman James Torrance of the 7th Council District. I'm honored to be here today, both as not a son of Baltimore, but a son of returning citizens. This is near and dear. This is personal in terms of the work. I'm gathered here with the Mayor of Baltimore, Mayor Brandon Scott, as well as Council President Nick Mosby, and then my colleagues from the council, Councilman Zeke Cohen of the 1st District, as well as Councilman Chris Barnett of the 8th District. I think Councilwoman Ramos of the 14th District was here earlier. In addition to that, we have our Police Commissioner, Rich Worley. In addition to, we have Stephanie Marvolis from Muncie, as well as Greg Alexander from Muncie as well, and we're for Workforce Development. Again, I'm Councilman James Torrance. This is near and dear to me, first and foremost. I just want to lift up the name of Pamela Massenberg, who is my mother. She was convicted of a felony, and due to that felony, she had to live on my grandmother's couch for several years. She got access to workforce development, but it was not sustaining. And I say that because as we think about this office, the work that needs to happen, it is unique to the persons who come out and re-enter Baltimore. My grandmother helped my mother get back on her feet. My mother had to be a mother right away. So this is important for this office because we have to have a chance to talk about family reunification, especially for women, because women have to be mom right away. In addition to that, we got to think about what does education look like. My mother and my father did not have high school diplomas. So the access to education was totally different. I say that because they both re-entered back and forth into the prison system. This is an opportunity to right-size what we do as a city, but in addition to that, thinking about this in a different way. We look at the inequity. I represent the 7th Council District as well as Council President Mosby. We recognize that West Baltimore receives the largest portion of our citizens returning home from our incarceration. I think about Joe Jones, Monica Cooper, Nicole, who are always advocating for assistance. I think about Pivot, who's doing it as well in West Baltimore now. This is important work. The reason why is because two things. People need access and safe return plans that Muncie is doing for education, housing, transportation. I say that because my mother had to make one lie. Where did she know she was coming home to? Had she not lied, she would have stayed in prison and had to complete her sentence. And the easiest way for a person to violate parole is by not telling where you're actually going to live. Access to a driver's license, access to just basic necessities. So I want to say this is one part. This is an opportunity for our city to get it right. And as a person who is a strong believer in my Christian faith, redemption is real. Second chances is real. And this is the city leading by example and saying that every person that returns back to Baltimore deserves a second chance. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Scott and then Council President Mosby.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Councilman, and thank you for leading on this important work. The Councilman's story is too prevalent and far too known across the city of Baltimore. And it's unacceptable that we as a city have the highest incarceration rate in the state of Maryland, with the majority of mass incarceration taking place in our historically neglected neighborhoods. And we know the time frame that happened in. This, and going back in and out, is a vicious cycle that is played out in the lives of our neighbors for generations, primarily because they have not had the proper support from their local and state government to help them successfully re-enter society and chart a new path for their lives. Every year, thousands of Baltimoreans return from prison, and I believe that everyone deserves a second chance. So it is our duty to ensure that we reconnect our returning residents to society immediately after they are released. This is something that we explicitly focus on when we outline our comprehensive violence reduction strategy, because we know that supporting returning citizens and reducing recidivism are key components of our work to produce sustainable long-term public safety improvements across our city. Through Muncie, we've begun the work to coordinate a re-entry continuum of care and outline steps to stand up Baltimore's first ever re-entry action council. And we've been working with DPSS and other local agencies like MOED, Rec and Parks through our Returning Citizens Behind the Wall pilot to connect returning citizens to employment before and after their release date, so they're able to have the fresh start that they deserve. The fact is that we haven't always had a dedicated home for reentry services within city government. But this is something that impacts so many of our residents, so my administration is very happy and excited to partner with Councilman Torrance and make sure that this work remains a priority through this legislation. And even as we have begun laying the foundation for this work, our plan is truly to begin widespread implementation and integration of our reentry efforts as a part of the Comprehensive Violence Prevention Plan's securing year, which ends in July of 2024. This legislation will help support and codify this work with MONSE moving forward, allowing us to build on the progress we've made while reaffirming our shared commitment to supporting Baltimore's returning citizens. Because when we think about a better, brighter, more equitable and inclusive Baltimore, we are working to build the one that we're working to build with our neighbors behind the bars and help them connect with the outside world. We advance our vision for a Baltimore that is a safer place to live for all of our residents. And we have to, again, thank all the folks that have joined us today who've been doing the great work for many, many generations. Always want to uplift Joe and the great work that the Center for Urban Families does. I was just there a few weeks ago for a graduation. We know that this work is important, and now partnering with the council and the councilmen, we're able to codify this important work into law so that we make sure that it happens long after all of us are standing up here or gone. Mr. President, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I come and stand before you as President of the City Council, and the Council is committed and stands shoulder to shoulder with the administration and Councilman James Torrance today on creation of the Office of Returning Citizens. We have these press conferences a lot where we gather and media comes out and the community's focus, and you see all the palm cards, you see all of the social media tags, but typically it's about building brick and mortar. Well, today we stand before you as a solid group of the council as well as the administration to say building the human flesh and tissue is just as equally important. And that means, as it relates to our returning citizens, providing them real pathways of success and access for a brighter future. As individually we can continue to go about our lives, we understand and know the uplift of Baltimore will take a collective effort. And the thousands of young men and women who return home every single year to the city of Baltimore should have access to the uplift of our communities, be it as it relates to housing insecurity issues that we want to address, educational issues that we would like to address, vocational training and other pathways to success as it relates to careers is critical, and that's why this office is here. We could have a resolution, we could have a work group, but having an office solidifies something that has a foundation to collectively bring together all of the city assets and resources to ensure that they have pathways to success. The last thing I will say is the only individuals that have to walk around with a scarlet letter on their chest for the rest of their lives based off of past failed policy are folks who have been convicted of a crime. This is one step further to provide folks who have paid their debts to society the ability to come into our workforces, come into our society, and uplift it the way that the city of Baltimore desperately needs. With that, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilman James Torrance, for the support on this legislation.
Questions, you all? Keith?
Councilman Torrance, if I could begin with him, Mr. Mayor. Councilman Torrance, what will that reentry, you touched on it a bit, if you repeat yourself, that's fine, but what will that reentry legislation look like? And again, what makes that so important, especially regarding recidivism?
So, Keith, I think back to when I started the mayor's office in 2009 when this work was deeply embedded. It started years ago. That's why we have people in this room who've been at it for a long time. The conversation changes because MONSE for the last 2 years has been standing up an office within their office. But we want to make sure that the policies and advancements that they've made are solidified and in place after all of us leave, right? And I say that because things here today may not be gone tomorrow, but having an office in our actual statute allows this office to function. I'm going to be a cheerleader for it because I know personally how my life changed when my parents couldn't actually re-enter. So we're going to be out there pushing to make sure that with my council colleagues, I've talked to them over the last 2 years, updating them on what the work looks like, working with MONSE. This is a game changer in terms of making sure that There's one integrated source to coordinate this across city agencies, work with our state partners, work with our federal partners to get this done, but also in communities like Boston and DC, when they introduced these offices and did it, homicides went down, major crime went down. This is the right thing to do without actually having to do the policing.
And pressing that point, this is personal for you.
It's very personal, to the point where my wife is even here with me today, right? The reason why is because two parts, right? I saw my mom, who was a returning citizen, and I'm gonna say this, who was denied health care and had breast cancer. Because of her criminal record, she was denied and she died of breast cancer, right? So like, this is deeper than just helping people. This is the collateral damage that we have from just one mistake. My mother's mistake was one thing that cost her 5 years away from me and my sister. But when she re-entered, she only had access to being a hairstylist. And from there, she had to navigate and live in public housing because she was relegated to just not family-sustaining wages. So for this, it's personal because if we're going to have a thriving Baltimore, we have to make sure every citizen in the city thrives as well.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
You burned yours. Next.
Is this a structural thing? Is it an organizational thing? Is it a physical thing as far as a building goes? Explain what exactly the legislation is going to do.
It's all three, but I'll let the councilman explain it to you.
It is definitely all three. Let me reiterate, this work has already begun. This office exists. They're hiring for people now, right? They've already started going behind the walls and creating those re-entry plans for people. The work's happening. It's just making sure that this work stays, right? Let me reiterate, it stays and it continues beyond that. This is also, there's going to be a council that is created that allows us to be informed by returning citizens about what their desires and their needs are, as well as how we workshop it on behalf and advocate for them, right? But they're also advocating to us directly and creating policy recommendations, right? And I think that's where this changes. This is not only the self-efficacy of the community, but also us recognizing that they are human beings and that their humanity matters.
And Mayor, since you're here and the police commissioner's here and Monty's here, there was a hearing today for the suspect in the mass shooting. Where are we in that investigation?
Well, we already know the charges that were brought forth. Now we know it's out of our hands and in the hands of the state's attorney and the court system. We know that BPD, as I said, many times, that we had the best detectives in the world working on it, and they were going to bring people who were responsible in, and they've done that. And now we have to allow the other parts of the justice system to do their work and respect that process as well. Any other cameraman? Yes, sir.
I get your reaction to the fatal carjacking in Canton.
So anytime someone gets killed, it's a tragedy, right? And when we have something happen like this in a carjacking, whether it's in Canton or it's in Park Heights, it matters. And it matters equally when it happens in both of them. I am incredibly and deeply sorry to that individual and his family that they lost someone, but that goes for everyone that we lost over this past week, that we've lost this year, that we've lost in the 39 years that I've been alive in Baltimore. But I will again use this as a important way to highlight the importance of the work that happens every day. And when you hear me and you hear the police commissioner, and you hear the state's attorney, and you hear the county executive, you hear the county state's attorney talk about our frustration that we are continuously seeing the same people involved in carjacking to only find out that we arrested them a day ago, 6 days ago, a month ago, 2 months ago. This is what happens when that cycle is allowed to happen. And as I said to many folks that are involved, this is why we have to look at working with our partners in the state, the completeness that is the juvenile justice system, and building something in Maryland that does not exist here or anything else, anywhere else. This is why I have been for years, right? I think it's very eye-opening to some of us that after 8 years of not asking state government anything about public safety, that now everyone's so concerned about what the state is doing because we have a new governor, right? We know that Governor Moore and his team, I met with the DJS secretary in Mako this week. They are ready, willing, and able to do this work, and I know that they will, to work with all of us to build a system that balances out accountability for everybody, including young people, but also understanding that young people's brains are different. But we have to get to the core of this. Look, you guys have heard me talk ad nauseum about home monitoring. Hell, I had a bill in Annapolis this year to deal exactly with this issue, only to find out that what? This young man who participated in the Brooklyn shooting was on home monitoring, right? So this isn't anything new. This is the stuff that myself and other local leaders have been saying, and now we're glad that we have partners at the state level that are actually going to work to tackle them alongside us after being ignored for 8 years.
Any regret about the comment you made about the former governor over the weekend?
No regrets.
On the note of students, can you comment on, as students are going back into schools, and for the last year we had a lot of incidents of student killings in and around schools, how can you ensure students that they're going to be safe going into the school year?
Well, listen, all through the summer, Tasha, and thank you for that question, we've been doing safe passage work and all of this work. We've had folks from We Are Us and others working with us to work directly with those young people. This is also something else that we spoke with our state partners about, of making sure that we're identifying and working with young people that we know might be at high risk. Schools are a place that we want our young people to be, because that's what their job is right now, to get educated, and we are going to be there in every way that we can to support them. But I will also use this at a time to send a message out, because anybody that works with young people and works in a school will tell you what happens in the community comes inside, and what happens in the school spills out. So to everybody, parents, cousins, grandparents, barbers, beauticians, coaches, everybody that works with these young people, when you hear something, you have to raise it up. If you're outside the community, raise it up. Let those folks in the school know, so that we can have the folks that are necessarily need to be involved in that, involved to prevent these kind of things from happening, because these young children are being hurt over small, regular, middle, and high school beef that they do. But we have to intercede in a different way, because these conflicts are becoming more deadly.
Last question.
Mr. Mayor, as you focus on reentry here regarding offenders, lawmakers in Annapolis, as you know, are preparing for a meeting regarding juvenile offenders.
I just answered that question, Keith.
Pardon?
I just answered that question, but go ahead.
And coming up with solutions focused on tougher sentencing. Now, you've agreed the system regarding juvenile offenders needs to be built brand new. With that said, what are you going to ask lawmakers to focus on regarding harsher penalties for juvenile offenders?
I think it's about this, Keith. I think that if you go into something with a predetermined answer, then you're not going into it to solve the issue. As I said, the system needs to be built from its entirety, right? I know that a lot of folks want to pigeonhole this into be about tougher sentences, but it's also about how about we do the basic things right. So the first thing that we're going to be asking is the stuff that we've already asked for. How about when someone's on home monitoring and they're not where they're supposed to be, local law enforcement and local partners should be able to effectuate getting those people, either if they're in violation of something else, like have a handgun or something like that, in the hands of the BPD. But if they're just in violation of being out, getting them to DJS and the folks that are supposed to be working with them. Let's start with that work. Let's make sure that when somebody is arrested for a shooting, for a carjacking, that they're actually held accountable for that. And that's how we can actually rehabilitate. If you just listen, I want to be very clear about this. Not every single young person that's arrested for something like this, sending them back home is not the solution for everyone. We have to make sure that we're putting the supports as we're holding them accountable to actually rehabilitate them. Not just sitting them in the box for 2 and 3 years, not just allowing them to just sit inside and learn how to, quote unquote, become better at what they were already doing. And that's why it's important that you hear me say that we have to build a system, and I know that our state partners are going to be working to do that. Thank you.